Welcome to Dr. M's Vodcast, a vodcast with a mission to connect continuous improvement professionals across the world.
Okay. There we go. This is the, is it visible to you?
I can see.
Fair enough. This is Dr. M's launch. I've been trying different platforms. You came on the Dr. M's podcast where you gave us the entire meat of the fame. And then I moved on to SMET platform, the single minute exchange of thoughts. I had two gentlemen exchanging their thoughts. And now this launch, we've thrown it open so that people can come and meet all those people, all those guests who were there in Dr. M's episode. So this is the 5th episode, and you're going to talk to us about human resource development in Toyota. And this I have dedicated it to my sensei, Masaki Mai. I was with him for 20 years, and that's a dedication to him for all my episodes. And there we go. The nuclear gentleman, submarine veteran, native of Kentucky, and then he surfaced out again in Kentucky, Toyota Motors. I think we should give a round of applause because he completes 37 years next month. Am I right?
Correct.
Great. So we have Dennis Dio Parker. And there we go. He's the developer of FAME and the FAME Career Pathway, Federation of Advanced Manufacturing Education. And what I like about it, when he covered the episode with me, which I shared with on my podcast, is they're the first education pathway designed with the lean principles and practices. There is a question survey during our course, and I put it last. I think the FAME, there's a lot of talk about FAME. So I just put it as the last part of it, because there's a lot of things that you're going to explain to us about. And we move further. And here we go. So, Dennis, I cut short the cycle time, and I'm just handing it over to you. And
Okay.
The format is this, that you go through your flow, and then we directly interact with the guests, the invitees here. And if the questions are sent to me first, then I'll be able to show it across. If it isn't, then you just interact, right? Over to you, Dennis. And thanks a lot for all of you to have come.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here again. I'm pleased to engage with all who are on the call today. And I'm going to add a little twist to it. So we also have someone in the audience who worked at Toyota with me. So Tom, as we go through this and we engage with the participants, if a thought occurs to you or you want to add something to that based on your experience, please do so. So today's general topic, human resource development at Toyota. And I believe in the time span we have, we won't be able to touch most of that. We're a very big organization. There's a lot that we do. I'll probably focus in on a few items that maybe particularly affect how we develop for operation, right? Or how we educate and train our people so that we ultimately gain a stronger business impact. And maybe that's where I'll start, is before we get into details, what is the purpose of human resource development? Why do we do it? Why is it an activity that companies would want to engage in? Well, in the bottom line, if you're in the private sector, if you're a company, if you're doing business, you're going to be ultimately focused on your business outcomes. And you're going to be focused on those business outcomes in the context of how you do both on your own metrics of success, but also you're looking at the larger competition of other similar businesses in the free market. And I'll just make a quick caveat here. Competition is a very good thing. Competition is something that drives us all to improve, but it's also a driver of business development, and therefore it's a driver of human resource development. So with that big picture in mind, maybe I'll start very high level with Toyota. So, what does Toyota do in regards to human resource development? Well, first is this. Let's go to how we integrate human resource development. I may say people development, take those as interchangeable. I won't be trying to think about the actual words that I'm picking here as I go. But let's take a look from the business aspect. So in Toyota's operation, one of the aspects that we put a lot of focus on are 5 key business elements. And we circle almost everything that we do in one way or another on how they impact those 5 business elements. And I'm going to tell them to you right here, but before I do, let me give you one more bit of context. Think of the fact that there's maybe 100 or 150 business elements that all have some kind of impact that's important to pay attention to. So these would be the top 5 out of many. I don't want to give you 5 and think, well, number 1 is really important and number 5 is not so important, right? Think of this as the top 5 out of many, many. So even number 5 is really important. Now, that being said, what are those 5 business elements? Here they are. Priority is important in this case. We do put them in a priority order. Number 1 at the very top is safety. And so safety, if you want to understand the connection to TPS, Toyota Production System, or the Toyota Way, or Lean, respect for people, right? More to it, but I'll just leave it at that. Number 2 on that list is quality. If we don't produce quality, customers will not buy our products, and we won't need to have a business discussion in the first place. But if we're producing quality, if we're producing something that customers want to buy, then number 3 on that list is productivity. Let's do it efficiently. Let's do it effectively. Then, having considered those 3, number 4 on that list is cost. So how do we control cost to effectively drive profit? And then number 5 on that list, 5th on that list of key business elements, but very high in the way we look at it, is HRD, human resource development. And the way we look at that is HRD is what enables us to perform well on the other 4. So there you can see a very big picture way of how Toyota approaches the concept and the practice of human resource development from an operational perspective. If we go beyond that, it would be maybe another background to understand how Toyota does HRD would be this. I know that in the lean world, many companies, other organizations look in and they go, oh my gosh, Toyota does this so well. They're the ones to benchmark after. I want to turn that around a little bit too. We do work hard at TPS. We do work hard at the Toyota Way. We put a lot of effort into it. We think about it all the time. But I can tell you that internally, we don't see ourselves as perfect at all. Far from perfect. We very much concentrate on what we're doing well. We very much focus on what we need to improve. Part of that is that we're not as standardized as we would like to be. Maybe compared to some other organizations, maybe we're very standardized, but when we look at it ourselves, we're not as standardized as we would like to be. We have a lot of gaps. And so I'm going to say that in context of HRD, do we have some common practices? Do we have some common directions? Do we have guidelines that in all parts of Toyota that we use? Do we have philosophies, principles that guide us? Yes, we do. But when it comes down to actually practicing HRD, you'll find some differences throughout the company. You'll find some different approaches, or if we have a common goal, you might find different methods in getting there. So maybe that's a first look. We're like any other company. We're like any other organization. We're constantly looking at what we do, how well we do it, and how we can identify where we need to do better, and then how we can improve that. And so it's the same with human resource development. But okay, now some big picture things. What are some things that we actually do? Well, we have very active training activities, and training comes in different formats. So we do have a pretty healthy library of online training. We have a lot of in-person training that we do. Some of that training is done on a regional level. Some of that training is done at a local level at the particular organization, at one of our manufacturing plants or at one of our other non-manufacturing sites that we had. Some of it is done in the shop. Much of it is formal. It's developed. It's a set course. It's off the shelf. We can teach it. We qualify and certify instructors for it. Much of it is informal. Much of it is driven at the place of work, at the place of performance, Gemba, if you want to use that term. And so you can kind of see a cascading effect here where we have some very broad types of principles or learning that we need to do. And then we will sit there and we will continue to focus that down onto how do we apply it right here at the floor. Maybe another look is this, is we have some of the same kinds of training that every organization will have. So safety, we have a lot of safety training. Safety training in many ways looks very similar to what other organizations do, because whether it's in a state, whether it's in a country, in our case, I'd say, USA, but all nations have safety activities, safety regulations, safety bodies, governing bodies. We will all circle around that to provide that type of training that we have to provide. We have supervisory and leadership training. We have communication training. We have a lot of training around the TPS and the Toyota way. So no surprise there, right? And maybe where some of your questions go later. But then we also have some programs like FAME. And so FAME is a very structured talent pipeline program that really starts outside the company, engages in partnerships with school systems from which new workers come, and puts together a very structured, very intentional developmental activity that will conclude in someone going to work for Toyota or one of the FAME companies. We have like almost 500 companies now that participate in this with us, and then would transition over to our internal development that we have, our people development that we have. There's another aspect that, while I'm talking about these broad swaths, there's another aspect I'd like to address too. And part of that is what is your fundamental philosophical educational approach? And I'm saying that because I realize this is a global audience. Most of my experience lies in how the US educational culture works, but also how it coincides with the Japanese culture, maybe a wider Asian culture. But it's important in our case. So I want to, and we're talking about HRD at Toyota, so I want to address that a bit too. Speaking only for the USA, you in the audience would know how, if you're not in the USA, you would know how what I'm about to say would either be similar or different. But in the USA, there is very much a unspoken, often unthought of, but very strong philosophy that you make your own success. You will drive to develop yourself. You will work hard to develop yourself, and the person who is responsible for your development is yourself. Now, if someone has that drive and they want to develop and they're willing to put in the effort, then others are ready to help, right? Ready to help. I would love to help you with that. Let me make this suggestion. I'll teach you this. Come to this class. I'll work hard. But in the end, you have to want it. And I have to see that you want it. Now, it's a little bit of a simplification, but it's a mindset that also reflects maybe a larger American approach. Now, let me flip this and go approach that I think is naturally Japanese, naturally Asian to a great extent, and that is I'm going to call it a sensei learner approach. We have people who are very learned, very knowledgeable in what they do, who are masters at what they do. We have a learner. And so first aspect of this is to a considerable extent, it starts from almost an individualistic aspect, but now the focus is on the master. Another aspect of this culture is that there is a significant responsibility on the master for the learner to gain skill, for the learner to learn. And so this is a little bit different than the American philosophy, where the motivational responsibility is almost all on the learner. But in the Asian philosophy, there's much more of a balanced, maybe almost going to the sensei part. The learner is going to learn. It can be a very positive thing, but the learner is going to learn. It's my responsibility to see that they learn. I must act to see that they learn. Let's apply this to a work or a business or a manufacturing setting. If the learners, new workers, those who are not as knowledgeable, those who don't have all of the aspects and practices of the business mastered, if they don't learn, our business is going to suffer. And so that's one perspective we can see the importance of this in. So what have we done, at least at Toyota in the USA? We've blended that to some degree, right? We've blended that. So we have almost a unique product in that sense in how we approach this at Toyota. So I will tell you that in management at the plant, we have a strong principle, a strong concept that our people must learn. It's not an option. It's not a negative approach, but it's not an option. Our people must learn. They must grow. They must develop. It's not really a choice that, well, you're going to work hard and you're going to learn a lot, but well, I wish you would do more over here, but if you're not, I get that, you're not. Everybody has to learn. Everyone has to come up. And whatever level I am responsible to see that happens. But at the same time, we still have that very fundamental, I need to learn, I need to be motivated, I need to be responsible for myself. And so many of our systems, I think, would reflect that duality of where we bring both together. A couple of practices, just to give you an idea, a couple of practices. Something that's very popular to do at Toyota. I think maybe not so much at other American companies, but I'm not certain, to be honest. I've been at Toyota 37 years. Other than the military, most of my business world has been Toyota. And it's also something that's common to do in our plants elsewhere, is if you're in management, so realize now your boss, you're a learner in relation to them, right? They'll give you a book. The book is just a blank notebook, but you're expected to put something into that book every day. And sometimes that may vary based on who your boss is, right? But one of the common things that will go into that book, and realize it must be a daily entry. You have to take a moment, you have to reflect, and you have to put this in, is how have I developed my people today. Very much focus on today. What have I done today to develop my people? How did I do that? What is a reflection on it? And it must be a daily entry. And every so often, your boss, who is your leader, will go through that to see what's in that. And we'll have discussion with you, and we'll develop you in that thought, reinforce good practices. So very much a mentoring activity, very much a sensei type activity, right? And so another thing, just to give you an idea, in this little book practice we have, notebook practice, sometimes it'll be, what have I learned today? So we go through here, what have I learned? An interesting note on this is we're starting to see this practice now move into lower levels of the company. I have a daughter that works for the company. She works in skilled maintenance. She's a skilled technician. And when she was doing her training on the floor, there was a 2-year period, they gave her a book. It was actually, I bet it's gone on before, but I didn't know that. But she's my daughter, so I talked to her, right? It was the first time I'd actually learned that right down at the hourly level of employees, this practice had come all the way down to that. So there's a little bit on philosophy, right? You know, philosophy, the approach we have, some of the practices, maybe how it works a little bit in our head. Next thing I want to cover, just to try to give you a little bit of a picture of development at Toyota, is how do we approach this organizationally? So first, I'm going to tell you a couple of things about the larger Toyota. So in Japan, at what you might think of as our global headquarters, we have an organization known as Toyota University. And Toyota University brings in many different aspects of learning and people development. Closer to the actual manufacturing operation, we have an organization known as the Global Production Center. Now, I want you to follow this because there's a pretty important dynamic that's going on that stretches all the way from the global level right down to the local plant level, to the shop level. So we have Global Production Center. Here's a little bit of a story for you, a Toyota story on why we have a Global Production Center. Toyota built its Georgetown plant. Today, that's Toyota's largest plant in the entire world, but it didn't start that way. It started as a vehicle assembly plant back in the middle 1980s. And when we started that plant, it was really important to Toyota. It was not the first plant in the US or North America. It was not the first plant. It's far from it. It was actually our 4th plant, but it was the very first big investment in a large vehicle plant that we built. We built it the Toyota way. And so there was a lot of stake was put into that, right? We were taking a big risk that we hoped would have big payoffs. As it turned out, it did, right? But we didn't know that at the time. And so we had many people come from Japan, many Toyota workers who came and joined us. I was there in those days. That's how old I am. Who came at all levels, and they really helped us a lot. They taught us, they mentored us, they helped us set up the first practices. They began developing how we think in the Toyota way. They began teaching us TPS, many things. Okay, it was good. It worked. We gained skill. We started the next plant, and we started the next plant, and we started building plants in Europe, and we started building plants in other parts of the world. And we ran into a problem. When we didn't have so many plants outside of Japan, we had enough of these very knowledgeable, very masterful teachers who could go and take their knowledge and impart it to the workers at the new plant. But as Toyota's footprint grew larger in the world, there weren't enough. And you couldn't take all of them. We still needed to have very competent people working in our plants in Japan as they made product. So it was a big problem for us. From that, the countermeasure, problem-solving thinking, right? Problem-solving thinking came the Global Production Center. It's in Japan. It is the global source of our expertise and our knowledge and our wisdom of how to manufacture. we established 3 world regional production centers. One in Bangkok, Thailand, for what we call the Asia Pacific region. One in Europe for what we call the European region. The Global Production Center itself also acted as the regional center for the area around Japan and what that was involved. We called that Oceania. And then in the US, we established one in Kentucky for the North American region. And that's where I work. So that was established in 2000. I have been there ever since. Now, take a look at this dynamic. These regional centers are all direct outgrowths of the Global Production Center. And we did the same thing at the regional level. We took our strongest experts and we all brought them to the regional center. Strongest experts in assembly, stamping, in welding, painting, engine assembly, engineering, all of these different aspects of operation that we do. But we also brought our experts in other areas. So how do we develop the maintenance function, the technology or technical function, right? That's how I came to be there with a team of a few others. We brought our experts in at that time, manufacturing floor level TPS development, and we brought them there and other business systems that we have. And so for the whole North American region, same in those other regions, we have a gathering of the very top experts all together. And now we have these 2 levels, our global set of experts, our regional experts. And then we took the functions of each one of those at the regional level. Here's our assembly, here's our body weld, here's our paint, here's our engine machining. And at each plant, that was the next level down, was actual plants. At each plant, we established a training area that was a direct outgrowth from the regional center, directly connected. So look what happens all of a sudden. Now we're able to effectively organize our expertise and our wisdom in manufacturing operations, but also our other operations like Toyota Way and more. And we're able to make sure the regional trainers stay at the top of their ball game because they're directly working with the global trainers. And the shop trainers at the plants stay at the top of their ball game because they're working directly with the regional trainers and educators. And we're able to deploy new training or changes or upgrades or improvements very quickly because we can go all the way from the top to the plant level to the shop in 3 steps. And so that's a very important organization for us that we have. It allows us to very efficiently take common types of training, key parts of what Toyota does, crucial elements of the Toyota Way and TPS, and deliver that with quality throughout the organization. Now, how that will actually happen at the plant level, there may be some variation there in the structure and who they report to and how that inside the plant will develop. They may develop some of their own courses in addition to that, but that is how we can take the essence of Toyota and make sure that it reaches all of our parts in all the world and does it in a very standardized, very connected fashion. And I think maybe with that, so I've given you an overview of several areas of how we approach HRD. So maybe that's a good stopping place right there. Give you enough material to maybe start a dialogue and have some questions. What do you think, Dr. M? Is that a good transition?
I recognize Tom. He has a question for you, or you can add on.
Not really a question, just an add-on to that last discussion, because it's interesting. There's also another organization, I believe it's regional too, or maybe more than regional, called Operations and Management Development Division,
yep,
which works in conjunction with NAPSC or the GPCs to train internal Toyota people deeply in TPS. So it's a development opportunity, gets back to what Dennis was talking about. And that's where I came when I left the plant to OMDD. And you get deep study, self-development in TPS. And so that's another organization that then shares it with plants, in our case, throughout North America. So there's other organizations too that fit right in with what Dennis has described. It's a very well put together way to train people, I think.
So Tom, I want to add on to that again. Thanks for bringing that up. I want to add on that again. And let's bounce back and forth just a couple of seconds for the audience here, so they get a good grasp of this. And so if you look, so that OMDD organization that Tom just mentioned, crucially important to it. And there's often a parallel in-plant organization that works directly with them. So OMDD is that wide regional organization, and then the plant may have their own connected organization with them, right? So what's the difference? So what's the difference in what, say, the Global Production Center, Regional Production Center, and by the way, in the North America, we call that North American Production Support Center, NAPSC. It's a regional center. So what do they do that's the same? What they do that's different so that we don't have overlap? Tom, I'm going to take a shot at it, but you absolutely, because you came out of that OMDD organization, you get this on the right side from that aspect. OMDD would be considered the official TPS experts in the bigger company. Not that we're not working officially in APSC, but if you say, where's the temple? Where's the temple of TPS for North America? That would be the OMDD organization. He noted they developed very deeply. They put in continuing improvement thought in very deeply. And they have basically at least two functions of which I'm aware. So do they train and develop? Absolutely. And they have a lot of product they deliver. But then they also do a lot of, and this is internal, right? They do a lot of, for lack of a better word, consulting and study in the plants to say, let's look at this situation. How can we improve this situation? What are we doing here? And so in that sense, they also become in coordination with the leaders of the plant. They become practitioners applying TPS at that deep level in order to transform practice. Would that be a fair, brief statement, Tom, or how would you?
That would be. I don't think I can add much to that, except to say that you mentioned that OMDD is internal. There is a sister organization, which I was also blessed to be a part of, TSSC, which does the same thing externally in North America to non-Toyota, non-automotive companies. So that's an opportunity to take what you learn in OMDD and apply it to non-Toyota, non-TPS situations, which is another form of development for people in Toyota.
Right.
So,
Dennis and Tom, I recognize that we have got most of them who are present over there. They're all Gamba practitioners. So we come from the macro to the micro. So permit me to get a little more deeper into certain aspect that, and I recognize Ryan Parker, you have a question. I can flash it across for you. This is, okay, I just run it through Dennis. Arnott is from Netherlands, and he wanted to know who is responsible for HRD and how organization mentoring future leadership. Faisal is from Middle East. I really don't know where exactly he's from. Hiring and consideration of weightage for qualification experience. This we are getting at the micro level, and I recognize that because most of them are Gamba expert or they're professionals there. Then Rajkumar is present in our audience, and he has these two questions which he can dwell on question on performance evaluation. How does Toyota, Raj, you can put it across as and when. And we got Ryan Zen, who asks, how do you engage employees in daily improvement? And you got Ryan, I think he's present over there. What element does an individual development plan have in Toyota, and kindly explain and advise the difference between efficiency, effectiveness, and HR perspective, how to influence. So here we go. And then we come to the AI part and the other philosophical part. But getting back into Raj and Ryan, you're both present and you all had the question. And Surjit, you also had a question, so go ahead and ask. Ryan Parker?
Yeah, one question or thought that came up. I recently toured the Toyota Material Handling Unit in Columbus, Indiana. And I was just curious, as you've been talking about these global, I guess, organizations that help train, I remember being on the floor and learning about the dojo training areas. Is that some way connected to what you've been talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And so first, I'm going to say that we use Dojo at Toyota with a small d, right? It's not part of an official system. And we use it very simply. It just means a dedicated training area. It can be something bigger, it could be something smaller, but it just says, hey, this is where especially at the shop level, right? Especially at the shop level, this is where our training officially is, or this is where the trainers sit, or this is where we have the classrooms at, or where we do the activities. Now, those various training activities would be connected in one way or another with many of the things that have just been discussed. So, for example, Toyota approaches skilled maintenance from a multi-skilled perspective. We don't want electricians and machinists and mechanics and welders. We want our technicians to do it all. They have all of those skills, right? Well, we have training, we have various ways we do that, but in the end, there will be a lot of training that will be done right at that shop level to build those skills. We have this for production too. I'm just giving an example, right? And maybe they're teaching some of the courses that we develop at the regional level. Maybe they're teaching some courses that they develop locally. Maybe they're hosting a vendor, whatever that might be. That would be done at the dojo. And that's how we tend to use that. Dojo, the way that we use that internally is not a special concept or some bigger concept. It's the place of training that we have. In that sense, even though we don't use it this way, you might say my organization, we have a great big old building. That's kind of like the regional dojo for manufacturing training in North America. Does that help, Ryan?
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Yeah, Sujit, you had a question? Sujit Singh?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening. We develop a lot of people in our company, various methods. Fundamentally, TPS is part of that, lean, so many systems across the world. We certainly face challenge in Indian context that we are not that much successful to develop the people because there is a difficult to understand that how Toyota developed this system and changing the mindset of the people. What training they are giving to their people that their mindset does not deviate from what they are teaching in the classroom. The same fundamentals, same technique, same books, everything we are teaching to our people, ourselves, and through mentors, various mentors who are industry experts. But still, the gain of the people to whom we are coaching does not reflect any good result coming back to the organization. So I would like to know what additionally we need to take care while developing, coaching the people.
Yeah. So I would say that on the first approach, it's a very generalized question. I think I get exactly what you're saying. I think maybe there's two elements at work here, and I don't know this. I'm just taking the question as is for where we're at. But I think there's maybe two elements at work here, at least based on my experience. Part of it is, what is the company culture for both lean but also for learning and people development, right? And culture is crucial. And I know that in the lean world, when we talk about if a lean effort is successful or not successful, it often goes back to, do we have the culture behind it? And I agree with that. I think that's a huge thing, right? It will be difficult, and I don't know how the culture is in your company. I know you're saying you're doing the practices, you're teaching the tools, you're doing the, but I don't know how the fundamental culture is, right? How deeply ingrained is it? But then we also have, and then also the learning culture, right? Is learning, and this is a rhetorical question, I'm not on that, but is learning something that is an intentional, ongoing activity in the company that everyone accepts, and you have some way of driving that forward, right? But we will be constant learners, and we will have activities that drive that learning, and learning is just as much a part of doing our manufacturing operation as working the machines are. The second part of it is this. So if the first part's a culture issue, lean culture, learning culture, the second part is this, is how much expertise do you have in how people and how humans actually learn, and how you put sequenced learning activity together, and how you assess the results of that to see if that was effective. And so whether that's done very officially, very formally, whether it's a large organization or a small one, that can be done at any level. But I guess basically what I'm going to say is education and learning is like anything else. There are effective ways to do it, and there are less effective ways to do it. And there needs to be some expertise, some level of know-how in how to actually deliver the learning activity. Now, I don't know how that fits your situation, but just based on what I heard, that would be the first place that I would go to think, why do we have the activities, but we don't actually have the results that we're looking for? Maybe one other thing I'll add to it on that, you get into the education thing, and I'm going to talk, I could talk all day about it. I'll try not to, right? But in a learning activity, whether that's a classroom, whether that's one-on-one training, has the educator very clearly identified exactly what the performance outcome in the learning activity is? Not on the floor, but in the learning activity. I'm going to teach you this, you're going to learn it, and this will be the outcome that I can observe to know that you've learned it as part of this learning. And if the educator hasn't done that, it's going to be difficult to have the right kind of activity to bring them to that. We need to really understand what that performance outcome is. And the second part of that is, do I understand how that performance outcome will transfer to outcome on the floor? Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, Raj Kumar is driving, so he has asked me to put up the question on his behalf. So let me find out where is his question. So there we go. Yeah, so Raj Kumar had two questions. He's driving, so he cannot ask you the question, but he had sent me this question. Question is on performance and evaluation. How does Toyota evaluate performance and effectiveness of human resource development programs? What metrics or indicators does Toyota use to measure the impact of HR development on operational performance? Over to you, Dennis.
Okay, so on the first one, if you'll keep those up, well, and I need to bring it back when I answer the second one, but the first one, let me say it one more time, please, Dr.
You want that?
Just
I'll do that for you. There you go.
I just want to make sure I get a good answer to it. How do we evaluate the performance and effectiveness of human resource development programs? Okay, so on that one, that answer really depends on the level that we're doing the evaluation, right? Okay, so one example, if it's in a direct learning activity, and again, it might be classroom based, it might be OJT, it might be a different type, but what we do is we typically will design in that assessment level that I was just talking about in the previous answer, right? And so if this is a learning activity, it's going to last 2 hours, it's going to last 2 weeks, what are the learning outcomes? How do I assess those outcomes? And how does the learner do on those outcomes? So I can see if the learner has actually advanced, right? So let's call that the direct level of learning. So we're very much about having intentional identified outcomes from various kinds of learning activities, whether they're technical, whether they're soft skills of some type, whether they're process related, whatever they might be, right? But now let's take that up a level. We also have systems, and how this is done can vary a lot from one plant to another or one shop to another, but we'll have systems. For example, here's one example. Here's a team of people. Here's a list of everything this team is responsible for doing. It's a task-oriented list. All of these tasks is what this team does collectively. By the way, at Toyota, we rarely have individual responsibilities, right? We're in a team, and this is what our team, and I'm talking about operational on the floor, this is what our team is responsible to do. And then we will evaluate the capability of each team member at performing that task. So we know what their level of capability or whether they've mastered that task or not. Part of that evaluation is training and learning. So if this is the task I have to master, have I had the proper training? Maybe it's classroom, maybe it's working with a team leader, maybe it's working with someone who knows, but have I actually been trained? There's not an expectation, you're just going to jump into it. We identify the training. Have I been trained? And this is very simple, but we'll mark it. Yes, they've been trained and the training was effective. Now we can go on to performing and see if we do it. So that is very much a way of looking and seeing how HRD affects our training. I want to give you one more example. In maintenance, skilled maintenance, technical work, right? Technology on the floor. And this is, I'll speak a lot to that because that's where I primarily work. We also have an operational assessment of how effectively an overall maintenance group, think of it as a shop maintenance group. They're responsible to keep that whole shop running. Might be a very big shop, right? But they must keep that shop running. They must make sure all the machines are ready for production, all of that, right? We have an assessment, and that assessment covers many different things from all the way from work techniques to management practices, many things. But one thing is your shop, does it have an effective training plan to develop your team members? And within that training plan, do you identify outcomes so that the outcomes can then drive performance? Maybe I will add one more in. We also do very frequent, and this goes beyond training, but we also do very frequent, I'm going to call it surveys of our people, our workers, and our management both. And part of those surveys, we're frequently asking if people feel like they're capable of performing their jobs, if they feel like they're getting the development they need and the training they need to do it. And that also gives us a feedback from that to understand, are we training enough? Are we training effectively? And of course, we can look at the business outcomes to see if our people have the skills. So hopefully that helps a little bit on that first one. Before I go to the second one, let me ask if that was generally the kind of thing that you were asking about. And does the answer help?
I wouldn't know whether he'll be able to answer that because he's driving.
Oh, that's right. You said that. I'm sorry.
Let me link that with the other questions related to that. For me to do that, they may not be present here because of the time zone. But here it is that how do you engage employees on daily improvement? You got another one that says what elements of individual development plan you have, and this is quite a general listing between efficiency and effectiveness. We'll take one thing at a time, and we go here. Sorry for that. I need to master my art at this. This is
yeah. So let's just pick one of them, and we'll hit it.
Yeah. So Let's start with this. Who's responsible for HRD? How do you have the concept of mentoring? We start with that, and then we flow down to the individual level, Dennis, if that's appropriate for you. And then I go back to the invitees present.
So who's responsible for HRD? So in our whole global organization, of course, we have a lead office. We have a lead office for HRD, which helps to set policy and practice for the whole organization, general directions, general things that we need to do, general principles and what we do, but they're not practicing HRD at the plant level. Let's go to the regional level. In North America, for example, our regional headquarters is in Plano, Texas. It's responsible for all of our Toyota operations in Canada, US, and Mexico. So we also have a human resources office there that sets regional policies. Among those regional policies, sets practices and directions around human resource development. But then we come down to a plant. At the plants, mostly the human resources department itself is responsible for HRD. And depending on how big that plant is, there may be a whole dedicated team to HRD. Or there may be just, if it's a small plant, there may just be a person, a training specialist or a training leader who works with the shop, right? But then we'll bring it down to the shop. At most of our larger plants, even the smaller ones, there will be people in the shop, in the specific shop, who are responsible for the shop specific training and development that needs to be done in that shop. And they will help to organize activities. They will work with supervisors. They may conduct classes. They may work with other parts of Toyota to send people to classes or to bring them in. So you also have people at that shop level who are responsible. And then right down into the group, you often have people who, as a side duty or a peripheral duty just for that group, will help and assist that group. A supervisor will help us assist that supervisor to understand the status of their own team members. By the way, that example I gave of like the team chart and where is everybody's competence level, and in that competence level where they've been trained, that would be done at that group level, for example. So if that helps to answer the question of who is responsible, you really see a multi-level connected activity of people who have responsibility, assigned responsibility for that. The other answer, part of our philosophy, no matter which level you're at, the leader always has responsibility to actively and daily develop their team members. Team leaders develop team members. Group leaders develop team leaders. Managers develop group leaders. Senior managers develop managers, all the way through the organization as a normal part of their leadership responsibility.
Yeah, just to add to just summarizing the questions that I see it. One is with respect to mentoring. The other is with respect to individual growth or career progression and succession planning. If you can address these three.
So mentoring, I'm going to say, occurs two ways at Toyota. We do have a formal mentoring program. And in that program, people will volunteer to be mentors. And I'm sorry, one thing very briefly, something we're not very good at Toyota, and I don't know how the rest of y'all are, so I'm going to address this. We sometimes get the language confused. So Dennis is going to know that mentoring and training and educating are two separate activities. They have a little bit of a relation, they're two separate activities. Training and educating, that is gain of skill, gain of knowledge, gain of competence, right? Mentoring, guidance, advising, direction pointing, helping to get problems out of the way, helping to inspire to some degree. That's mentoring, right? Now at Toyota, we often confuse those terms, which doesn't help. Now that being said, right? That being said, we have an official mentoring program at Toyota, and I mean mentoring in the right way, guiding and advising and leading. People can volunteer for it. There's training for it. You're officially assigned. There's materials to help. It can be tracked. And there's ways to go about doing it to make it very effective by tying it to actual job duties, right? But then there is the other side. I'm going to call it informal mentoring. And realize that is kind of built into our mindset and built into our culture. And I've already noted that maybe in some other questions here, 2 or 3 different ways, right? Part of my leadership responsibility is to actively work with anybody who reports to me on a daily basis in some way to continue to grow their capability to do their job. And I instill or put into that person that same responsibility. And you must be growing the people who report to you. And this goes all the way through a chain. And that's not a formal system. That's a very strong expectation. It's a daily expectation. We have little things like the book that I told you about, right? And so in that sense, we have I'm going to say a strong and ongoing mentoring program. Not program, I want to say program activity. A strong and ongoing mentoring activity in the sense that it's built into the expectations of leadership and development at Toyota. Did I miss any part of those questions that you asked, Dr. M?
No, that's fine. That's fine as far as the career growth is concerned. How about your succession planning in Toyota?
So we have success. Yeah, so we do formal succession planning. We especially do it at the upper parts of the company. So let's say at the executive level, it's very intentional. It has structure to it. It has activities to it. It very much has to do with not only the formal and informal training that you'll have for someone, but also the kinds of experiences that you give them to set them up to continue to grow into their jobs. And then we come down below the executive level to what I'll call the operational management level, right? And so we do it less formally, but still intentionally at that level. How well we do it, like I said, Toyota's not perfect, right? How well we do it can be sometimes inconsistent from maybe one shop to another, or how much it's emphasized at this plant as opposed to another. But it's always there at some level. And that thought is do I have people ready to take these positions when they open? Do I have people ready to take these higher level positions when they open at the floor level, right? And we sometimes do have problems with that. For a long time, at the Kentucky plant, as an example, we struggled with having team members ready to take team leader positions and team leaders ready to take group leader positions. The problem was not their capability to perform the job. The problem was their desire to take that position, because often they had to change shifts, or maybe there was some kind of pay issue around that and so forth, right? And so succession, whether it's capability to do the job or desire to do the job, you got to have both to be effective, right? Are part of that. So maybe that kind of helps give you a feel altogether. Very structured, very intentional, very acted on at the executive level, also active and intentional at the management level, and effective in different ways at the operational working levels.
Ryan, will you help me out with Nitin's question?
Yeah.
Nitin is based in Thane, Bombay.
His question is, what does Toyota believe in recruiting right talent or developing talent after onboarding?
I think this is actually true for many companies, right? So Toyota has a culture, we have a philosophy, we have an approach, and we have ways that we do. And maybe at the top of that list, if we're recruiting, one of our first things we're going to consider is, do we think you are fitted to our system? Many people aren't. Doesn't make them bad. They would be incredible at another organization. It's just that their approach and how they go about doing things, or how they think about things, are just not as fitted to our system, right? And then others are very fitted. They're the kind of person who could integrate, be part of the team, grow in the way that we that we do things, right? And so we give a lot of consideration to that. We give a lot of consideration to, I'm going to call it cultural and operational fit. Now, of course, you've got to have the talent, you've got to have the abilities, and you've got to have the competencies. But now, whether and realize my organization is not part of HR. I work for a North American level organization, and it's something that we do is we put learning and development not into HR from my organization's perspective, but we actually put it into manufacturing support. I think that kind of makes some sense, right? So I don't want to speak entirely into the HR people who do the hiring, but very, very generally, cultural fit, operational fit, along with having the competencies that we need, is how we determine, whether we hire someone or not. We also do things, again, I won't go into too much detail, but we always look internally first. If we have an opening, here's a better way to say it. If you see an opening advertised outside Toyota, we have already checked inside Toyota to see if there's someone who would be interested and would fit that profile. And that's part of taking care of our own people, right? Respect for people. Does that help answer the question?
Could I add something to that?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I was walking proof that there are some things they look for in the beginning, more around attitude, thinking, not necessarily hard skills. But you get developed in those skills, especially I started as a team member. So, I got taught how to do what I needed to do, and I learned it and then taught it to others and moved up through the company over the years. So definitely I was developed over the years. I'm a very different person today than I was 35 years ago. So I think that kind of speaks to that.
Amen. If you come into Toyota, you will be developed.
So, Dennis, does the host have the last question? Am I permitted to ask you the last question? Curious, because I got two Toyota people. It's rarely that I get an opportunity to talk. How does Toyota, which starts with respect for people, convert the culture as a part of a DNA of a Toyota person? Because I got Dennis with 37 years, Tom with 35 years, and they have it in them. They don't have to put an extra effort. They don't feel that they're doing it. They are being it. So how does that happen, Dennis and Tom?
That may be one of the hardest questions to answer, and I will tell you why. So here is where Toyota is very fortunate and very blessed. We are beyond the barrier of having to try to sustain the culture. I'm going to call it the Toyota way, or the TPS culture, right? It is so deeply ingrained into the organization now. It's what you said, right? It's so deeply ingrained that the question of whether we do it or not, or use it or not, is not a question. And it was not a question 37 years ago when I went to work, right? It is how the organization is. It is what the organization does. And so when you join, when you're hired, you come into the organization, what happens? Well, in some cases, we're teaching it. But in other cases, people are talking about it, not to make a point of talking about it. It's just part of the language of the organization, right? And so consciously or subconsciously, that begins to affect you. But then the company is also practicing it, right? So it's the practice. And so you start doing the practice too. Early on, maybe you don't ever understand everything about it. Maybe in some cases, you don't even realize you're practicing it yet, right? But because we are beyond the mountain, right? We're beyond the mountain. When you come in, I'm going to say the absorption from different directions starts from day one, and it never lets up. And then what happens is you begin, again, both a conscious and a subconscious learning and development and growth journey in just becoming more and more and more Toyota way, TPS minded. and you recognize more of it. And then you begin to recognize your abilities in it. And at some point, you begin to become effective at developing others into it. And you become part of the overall effort that continues to pass it on in the organization. So Tom might have a more direct answer or an experience to do it, but I don't think that we have a button to push that says, go to this training and learn to do that, and you'll be this way. It's literally almost a biologic of the company and how we live and grow. Now, do we always do it well? No, we don't. Do we sometimes have failings? Yes, we do. Do we sometimes do something and start to fade off a little bit? Yes, we do. Then we have to kind of re-strengthen it. We're not perfect by any means, but part of the company's culture is to be very problem-solving minded. And if you're problem-solving minded, you're very gap minded and gap focused. And so we'll pick up those gaps. We'll say, oh, we're not doing this well. We're not doing that, and so the culture itself will kind of bring it back up. But unlike a company who is trying to make a change to this, Toyota is so deeply into it now, at least based on my experience, that it's like jumping into the ocean. You're going to get wet, and it's just going to start soaking in after a while. Tom, anything to add to that from your experience?
I like that, jumping into the ocean and it's soaking in, because I was going to say it's kind of osmosis, or you're just absorbing everything, and a lot of times you don't even know it.
Right.
My introduction was the first day at Toyota. We walked into the plastic shop where I was working and going to be working. Went by a dumpster full of some scrap, mainly bumpers, and they looked fine to me. And so I was very impressed that they were throwing these things away because they were no good, but they looked fine. So I've always been kind of quality oriented. But what I come to find out later and is that was not a good thing, because that's not respecting the work of the people that made those bumpers that were then scrapped. So, you always got to try and get better. Let's not throw them away. Let's make sure we don't have them in the first place. And these kind of things just kind of seep in. It's over the years, it's I don't know how else to describe it. I think Dennis did the best job.
Yeah. And what I heard for the Gemba person like me, and for many of us, we recognize Toyota for 4 things: standard, problem-solving mindset, Kaizen, and Hensai. Anything on that? Because I have Kaizen on this side and Hensai on the other side. That's what my sensei Masaki Mai taught me. So standard, problem-solving mindset, Kaizen. Take it away and give us your final, we call it Guruvani. Guruvani means, you said that we believe in senseis and gurus, but not the gurus, what we all define it in West. We mean gurus in the true sense. Guruvani is the speech of the guru. We take it as the gospel truth, and we try to follow it as far as possible. So both of you are gurus for us. So just give us our last word on this.
I think all of those things you mentioned, they're part of the whole organism, right? Look at Kaizen. And what do we tend to say about Kaizen on the first thing? Well, it's continuous improvement. Well, why are we continuously improving? Well, part of that is because we have a problem-solving mindset, right? And what do we use problem solving for? Well, on one level, we use it to stay on the standard. But on another level, we use it to actually drive improvement above the standard, which is also Kaizen. They're almost non-separable. They're just maybe a different look at the same thing we're doing. I think you mentioned troubleshooting in that little part. In the end, it all integrates. And in fact, maybe I'll say this. And I'm still on this journey, right? This journey will never end. The day that I finally quit Toyota, there's still going to be things I didn't know that I would have liked to have known. But here is what I think occurs is, as you are at Toyota longer and as you become more integrated into the culture and knowledgeable of the application of that culture, you begin to truly understand how it all relates together. Those items you mentioned and more, not a single one of them is an orphan. Not a single one of them is something that operates by itself or is a sole characteristic. It's very holistic, and everything is part of another practice or another application or another principle. And so you come to a point where that wide view gives you really a different outlook on how you're seeing things at work and in life too. But it also really expands how you can respond to it to keep it moving forward.
Yeah, there's one
And I'll just say it's all human development too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that I heard Dennis saying is that you need not have a problem. You set a problem, right? Can you talk to us about setting the problem, which is very new to many of us? Very of us, like Surjit and many of us are Gamba guys, we're putting out fire, we don't have time. But Toyota not only solves problem, they set a problem for themselves to solve. Go ahead, and Dennis and Tom, tell us about problem setting.
Okay, so here's where it starts. It starts with this. It starts with the understanding that a problem is not a bad thing. A problem is a normal thing. There are always problems. I'm going to go back to the ocean. It's like the ocean, right? There are always problems. The real issue is do you see the problems? Do you recognize the problems? And do you prioritize the problems so that you address the most impactful ones, right? That's where it starts. Problems are a normal part of the fabric. And now let's go a step forward. Standardization is a huge part of what we call TPS, right? Huge. If we have a standard, that standard is supposed to produce an outcome that we want. And that outcome should be, we should know exactly what that is. It should be measurable. We know what it looks like. So what's always the first thought about problem solving? And I think the one you're speaking to, problem solving, formally or informally. Remember, mindset. When you have the mindset, 90% of your problem solving is not formal, it's informal because you recognize and you work that way, right? But our first thought about problem solving is it helps us to stay on a standard. Why do we have a problem? We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. What are we supposed to be doing? Well, you're supposed to be doing the standard. That's what it is, holding the standard. And here's the measure, here's the definition, here's how it works. Man, I just can't seem to get it and keep it there. Okay, let's go a step further and let's actually apply some structured problem solving thinking to this. And let's figure a way to get this back to the standard and keep it. That's kind of the typical way to think about that. But now let's flip it. What if everything is okay in this one area? And we do have problems, they're always there, right? But in this one area, everything's okay. It's been okay. We're doing a good job of maintaining the standard. The output from that standard continues to be what we want to get from it, right? Okay, now, but guess what? Something has changed, and that outcome is no longer what we need in the operational world or in the business world. It's doing what we want it to do, but something else has changed. And now we need to radically improve. And I'm going to say in this case, it's not going to be a small improvement. That would be a Kaizen level improvement, right? In this case, it will be a more substantial improvement. It'll be something much harder to do, much harder to reach. We might say it's a Hoshin level improvement, a big improvement, a large leap, right? Well, how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of things we could talk about. I've got to make a really radical improvement. One of the ways is to do it is this. One of the ways is to redefine the standard, even though you've never been there, right? You've never been there. I'm going to say, here's what the new standard needs to be. By the way, let me go back a little bit so I don't leave us behind. If we do a Kaizen, that's a concrete change. That's something that really changed, right? We did it. We improved it. Here's the improvement. I can see it, touch it, whatever. And now let's standardize that improvement, right? But what are we doing in this case? We're setting a standard that we've never had before. We've not reached it. We don't do it, but we're now going to make it the standard. We're going to define it, and there it is. It's a standard. The moment you make that official, so to speak, here's the new standard up here. And here's where I was operating at. Oh, guess what? I'm going to flip that. I'm now operating below the standard. Now, yesterday, fine. Today, because I have a new standard, it's not fine. I'm below the standard. What does this do for me? This allows me to engage problem-solving thinking, problem-solving methodology, problem-solving approaches, problem-solving urgency, in order to figure out how to move the real performance up to this new standard that I never had. And so it gives us an extra tool. It gives us the problem-solving thinking and methodology to help us to raise to a new level of performance. Okay, let's get back to our terminology. If this is a standard, this is what I'm really doing. This is my everyday. And now for some reason, I've fallen below this. We call that, at least in Toyota, we call that an event problem. What's the event? The event was I was here, but now I've fallen down. It's an event problem. But what if this is what I was doing and yesterday it was fine, but now I've got a new standard? I've never been here before, by the way, right? I've never done this. I've never seen it, but now I'm going to make it the new standard. In other words, what I did was I set a new standard. An event did not happen. I established a new standard. And now we're going to treat it like a problem and use problem solving to get up to it. We call that a setting problem. And that's how we leverage that kind of thinking in Toyota. Setting problems keep us on, event problems keep us on the standard. Setting problems help us to rise to new standards. Tom, anything to add to that?
I'll just add that you mentioned in the question that you're Gemba based and you're putting out fires. And first of all, if you're putting out fires, you're probably not stable. And so it's going to be very hard to set a new standard when you can't meet the one you're at. So the first thing to do would be to problem solve what's keeping you from being stable. Fortunately at Toyota, we don't normally have that issue too much, but in my work outside of Toyota, that's a very, very common issue. And normally the first place we start is let's get stable before we do anything else. Because you can set standards. If you're not stable, you will never maintain them. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth.
So that's
Tom, I want to tie that into something else that these people may be familiar with, and I think it'll make a lot of sense too. It's something that I've seen people struggle with on the House of TPS. And of course, there's different versions of the House of TPS. But one of the most common ones, too many, yep. One of the most common ones, one that we use at Toyota, if you look at the foundation of the house, now there may be several things in the foundation, but one of the things in the foundation is stabilized production. And what that basically means is it's going to be really hard to get up to these higher levels if you don't have your production stabilized. And in principle, in one aspect, that's kind of what Tom is talking about. It's going to be hard to go further and improve more if you don't have yourself stabilized at this operational level at the floor. So if you guys use a version of the house that has that stabilized production, I'll tell you on the maintenance side, when we developed the maintenance house of TPS, we just changed it to stabilized work. The principle is universal. Am I getting that right in the sense of the way you also think of it, Tom, or did I misdirect that?
Yeah, we think of stability as, that's what you're going to build your house on. If you build your house on quicksand, it's not going to stand. But if you build it on something that's very stable, you have a much better chance of it standing.
Sujit, I'm sorry. Sujit, can you unmute yourself? Sujit? Because that answers Sujit's question. Sujit, that answers your question. Your question was that we are doing a lot of development work. We're trying to educate people, but they're not getting educated. And
Yes.
you had the answer from both of them. That is your function stabilized, your production stabilized, and you're not doing firefighting. That I mean, you can ask question now because that answers your question in a way.
Yeah, I understood. Thank you.
So this is something else that Nipa, I put it to you, is the if what mindset. That's quite amazing that I
Yes,
find
yes,
with many
yes.
of the Toyota gentlemen that I've interacted with, the Kaizen mindset, the problem-solving mindset, and that setting up the problems even if it doesn't exist. And what if? I remember interacting with Ernie Richardson at some point of time, and when he said that even after you put up the standards, you keep asking, what if, to find out what happens. So thank you very much. And if you've got anything else, go ahead and ask. And Terry, I hold you back because we have a certain Peter Scholtes and Deming lovers over here, so we can interact with you. Thank you very much.
I
I'm going to
will
stop
have,
recording. Yeah, sure.
before you absolutely end it all together, I got one last observation to make, but I want to make it at the
That's
very end.
continuous. There's no absolute stop as far as I'm concerned. Go ahead.
Okay, so I want to show you one more aspect of Toyota and how this culture works, right? But you got a living example of it. And so first I want to thank Tom for all his contributions, but now let's take a second look at this, right? Tom happened to join today. He happened to come out of the same Toyota organization I did. In fact, most of our years, we weren't in the same area, but we knew each other and we worked Toyota, right? What is one of the natural parts of the Toyota philosophy, the Toyota principles? It's teamwork, right? We don't think in terms of individuality. We think in terms of team. And so while your advertisement said, oh, this session's about Dennis, but when Tom was on here, did you see how we just naturally went into a team thing with this?
Yep.
Folks, that's how it works on that, right? That you saw, if you wanted to see an aspect of the Toyota culture that actually worked in this thing right here, as soon as we had two people who were Toyota together, we turned this into a team dynamic. It's absolutely a fundamental part of that culture. And thank you, Tom. Awesome job.
I want to thank you. I really didn't join to be a part of it. I joined to listen to you. So thank you.
Oh, we are blessed that we listened to two of you. So thank you very much. And I'm going to stop recording. Thank you very much.